the possibility that Google may be broken up into a bunch of little baby Googles, little adorable mini Googles running around. That possibility is becoming increasingly likely by the day. A few weeks go by and it becomes more and more and more likely. You may remember that just a few weeks ago, a little less than 2 months, in late August, Google lost a massive lawsuit brought against it by attorneys generals from a whole bunch of states who alleged that Google was not only a monopoly, but was engaging in anti-competitive practices in relation to the search engine market. And Google lost. Google lost handily. They got their lunch stolen and taken away, and they got their butt handed to them. They lost in a big, big way. And as you read through the details of the judgment against them, it becomes difficult to see how Google could possibly win an appeal here, just simply based on the facts of the matter and the way the law is currently written in the United States. I don't see how Google could win an appeal. Sure, they could try to appeal, and that could result in kicking the can down the road a little bit, making the remedy phase extended out in time a little bit. But just the same, I don't see how they could win an appeal, so eventually the remedy phase is going to kick in, and it looks like we are just moving forward with the remedy phase right now. In fact, yesterday, October 8th, the plaintiffs in this case filed their first proposal with the courts of what that remedy might look like. Now, this is not the final proposal. I want to make that very, very clear. The plaintiffs have until November 20th of this year, which is a little over a month from now, to submit their final proposal for remedy. And what that means is Google was found guilty. Here's what they were found guilty of. Now, the remedy phase is how exactly can that be made up for and fixed, right? How can we have a remedy to that? So the plaintiffs will submit that to the court. Google then has 1 month from that point till December 20th to come back to the court with their proposal for the remedy, because Google has to submit their idea to the court of how to fix themselves, right? Because they were found guilty of anti-competitive practices in the search engine market. They have to provide the remedy to the court of how to fix that. I've read through that document in total, and it's very interesting, the remedies they come back with. But I want to point something out to you because I find this absolutely fascinating. It's worth thinking about. The bulk of this document, this is let me look at this. It's 30 some odd pages, 32 pages. The bulk of this document consists of signatories, right? These are the lawyers and the attorneys generals and the states that all signed on to this. And it's long. And it goes on and on. Here's Arkansas and the Attorney General of Mississippi, the Attorney General, the Bureau Chief of Montana, Carolina. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. We've got Nebraska and Arizona and Iowa and North Carolina and Utah and Alaska and Delaware and Connecticut. It's just page after page after page after page of states that signed on to this particular lawsuit. So what we have here is really, it's United States of America et al. V. Google and State of Colorado et al. V. Google. It's everybody v. Google. Holy heavens. So I went through the proposal, and you really walk away. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. I'll link to it so you can read it yourself. But you walk away with the impression that while multiple remedies are floated, that the plaintiffs don't see a way where Google would be effectively changed in such a way that this wouldn't continue to be a problem unless Google is broken up, right? Like that none of the remedies would really amount to a whole lot if Google remained Google with Android and Chrome and ChromeOS and all of their online services and search and AI all as one company, right? They only see it really being viable if it's broken up into multiple companies. Now, Google responded today. It's October 9th. They put out a blog post. This was from Leanne Mulholland, the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs. Holy heavens. When you're a company big enough that needs a Vice President of Regulatory Affairs, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, at that point, you might be a monopoly. So they put out the blog post that says DOJ's radical and sweeping proposals risk hurting consumers, businesses, and developers, right? Google's job here is to spin this in a way where they're being attacked, right? That's the whole thing. So I wanted to read a little tiny bit here because their response is interesting. The U.S. Department of Justice, the DOJ, today shared a broad outline of radical changes, it may demand as part of its lawsuit over how we distribute search. This is the start of a long process, and we will respond in detail to the DOJ's ultimate proposal as we make our case in court next year. However, because again, this is, November 20th, the final proposal from the plaintiffs, December 20th, the final proposal from Google, and then, nothing's going to happen on December 23rd or something like that. So it's going to be January or onward before this actually goes into court. Where am I? However, we are concerned the DOJ is already signaling requests that go far beyond the specific legal issues in the case. This case is about a set of search distribution contracts. Rather than focus on that, the government seems to be pursuing a sweeping agenda that will impact numerous industries and products with significant unintended consequences for consumers, businesses, and American competitiveness. The DOJ's outline also comes at a time when competition in how people find information is blooming, with all sorts of new entrants emerging and new technologies like AI transforming the industry. Here are some of the changes the DOJ is considering and where we see the risk of unintended consequences. Now, this is Google's job here, right? Their job is to spin this as the Department of Justice and the states. They're overreaching. They're radicals. They're really going crazy here. What's really fascinating to me here is the Department of Justice is involved here, and it's the Department of Justice that's controlled by the party that almost everyone in Google contributes to. That's fascinating to me to see that. And yet the people in Google are calling the Department of Justice radicals. What exactly is that going to mean going forward? I don't know. It's just, I find it interesting. It's like infighting. It's very, very peculiar. So they have a bullet point list here of Google's interpretation of what the plaintiffs are suggesting as a remedy. The first, forcing Google to share your search queries, clicks, and results with competitors. It risks your privacy and security. So that's not exactly how I read the document from the plaintiffs, but Google is trying to suggest to you that the states are demanding that Google hand over your personal information to all of their competitors. That wasn't in the document that I could find. But Google clearly is trying to spin itself as protecting your privacy from the evil states like Arkansas and Iowa and Connecticut who are trying to steal your personal information. That wasn't in there. Not that I could find. You can kind of spin some words to try and edit it and make it seem like that, but I don't think that was really in there. And it doesn't seem like that's really on the table. So I'm just going to move on. That's more spin than anything else. Hampering Google's AI tools risks holding back American innovation at a critical moment. All right, so one of the remedies being proposed is breaking up Google, right, which includes separating AI related businesses from, say, Android, right? So Android and AI, those would be in separate companies now, which Google is suggesting that it would significantly hamper their ability to expand both and integrate both, and therefore would hold back American innovation because Google's an American company, and this would hold them back from doing something. Therefore, it would hamper American innovation. That's the argument that they're making. Again, I'm not really buying that argument, I'm not really buying that, but Google's making that argument. And then the big one here. Splitting off Chrome and Android would break them and many other things. Okay, I'm gonna read this segment because I think this is the one that I think is the most important to focus on here, because this really does seem like might be part of the remedy. Quote, we've invested billions of dollars in Chrome and Android. Chrome is a secure, fast, and free browser, and its open source code provides the backbone for numerous competing browsers. It does provide code for numerous competing browsers. That part is true. Android is a secure, innovative, and free open source operating system that has enabled vast choice in the smartphone market, helping to keep the cost of phones low for billions of people. Because both Chrome and Android help people across the web and use our products, we offer them and their underlying code for free. Few companies would have the ability or incentive to keep them open source or to invest in them at the same level we do. Make no mistake, breaking them off would change their business models, raise the cost of devices, and undermine Android and Google Play in their robust competition with Apple's iPhone and App Store. Okay, I want to dive into that a little bit, because part of what they're saying is fundamentally true. Breaking, say, Android off from the search engine part of the company or the marketing part of the company would fundamentally change the business proposition here. It's important to remember that Google is at its heart fundamentally an advertising company, right? They're an ad broker. That's where they make their money. That's their cash cow, right? And they earn so much money through that. And a lot of that is through, they're able to fund things like Chrome and Android, because Chrome and Android provide them with an opportunity to have a captive set audience with their search engines and everything else and their advertising pre-installed, pre-set up, preloaded, and they can tie it into multiple aspects of the system, thus increasing the amount of revenue that they can generate from their advertising, right? They sell advertising space to other people. And they're ad brokers. They sell your data. This is how Google makes money, right? They're an ad agency. They're a data broker. If you split those apart, now Android has to survive on its own merit financially, right? So fundamentally, the business of Android has to change, right? And they have to start, I don't know, charging for updates, doing something else. But the fundamental business model of Android has to change. Now, this is a little bit misleading from one aspect, however, because Android already has built-in monetary and revenue models, specifically the Google Play Store and all of the related paid services that are part of Android. And that should be able, looking at the numbers, that should be able to monetize and allow continued development of Android just as it has been. The reality is Android is not from a budgetary standpoint, when you look at their annual reports, it is not a money sink for them. If you factor in the Play Store and the related services, Android is profitable from that point. It's extra profitable when you layer onto it all of the advertising stuff. And I can see from Google's standpoint, it would change their business model, because they can use that advertising to then fund other projects, like they're put a whole bunch of money into their AI projects, which isn't necessarily turning a profit yet. It's a loss, right? They're losing money because of their AI, but in the idea that eventually it will make money. So they're taking the profits from what they earn from advertising tied into Android and everything else to fund those other AI and similar projects. So yes, they're right. It would fundamentally change many of their business practices, but Android and Chrome, Android certainly by itself can stand on its own. ChromeOS could be an interesting case there, and Chrome as a browser could be an interesting case if you remove the marketing and advertising revenue from them and put them into separate companies. I can see how those particular projects may need to change a little bit of their ad revenue, a little bit of their revenue scheme, but Android not so much. That's a little bit of a stretch when they say that. And then they really just want to push how if they change anything, this hurts people. And I want to call out this statement here because I found this interesting. Changes to the online advertising market would make online ads less valuable for publishers and merchants and less useful for consumers. Google's innovative ads system has leveled the playing field for small businesses and publishers. Small advertisers can reach customers the same way as large ones do, with no minimum spend and no upfront commitments. I feel like this is an ad now for Google AdSense. And this ad system helps small websites earn revenue from online advertising, just like large publishers. Government mandated changes could disrupt this and tilt the field at the precise moment that competition is thriving. All of that's a little bit misleading, clearly, but they're trying to spin this as positively as they can. Now, what will be interesting is, see, they have a final statement here. We believe that today's blueprint will goes well beyond the legal scope of the court's decision about search distribution contracts. The court decision was that Google was a monopoly. I mean, it wasn't just about contracts. Government overreach in a fast-moving industry may have negative unintended consequences for American innovation and Americans' consumers. We look forward to making our arguments in court. Okay, so it will be interesting to see when November rolls around, November 20th. By then, we'll have a filing similar to the current filing that we just got of the final proposal from the states and the DOJ. It looks like it's very likely going to include some level of breaking up Google into multiple Googles. That may just be splitting the company in half. It may be more of a Ma Bell sort of situation where it gets broken up into a large number of different companies, but we'll see what the plaintiffs come up with. On December 20th, I am really looking forward to Google's response, because when Google files their official response, Google has to provide to the court a convincing argument for how the remedy can be implemented that would satisfy the plaintiff's concerns, the judge's ruling against Google, and make it so that what they were ruled to have done could not happen in the future, but still make it so Google is happy. I have no idea how they're going to pull that off. No clue at all. My guess is Google's going to shoot for the moon and be like, just, slap a fine on us, right? Something like that. And that's not going to happen. And then early next year will be the actual arguments in court. And the Lunduke Journal will be covering it, because this is going to end up being one of the largest stories in the tech industry for next year. The impact is not going to hit this year. It's not going to, right? Mozilla and Apple will continue to receive huge piles of cash from Google for default search engine placement in their browsers and other places, because the remedy phase has not kicked in yet. Next year, early 2025, the remedy phase will more than likely kick in, at least to a certain degree. It may be phased in over time, and it depends on how the court cases go, but and how aggressively Google appeals this, which I don't see as being successful. Sometime in 2025, we're going to probably be seeing Mozilla no longer getting funding from Google, which means their current infrastructure will all but collapse, because Mozilla makes over 80% of their revenue from search engine placement in Firefox on behalf of Google. That's where almost all their money comes from. And they have not yet successfully been able to spin up any of their AI and advertising businesses to replace that funding. So that means that Mozilla has months, not many months, not even necessarily half a year, but a couple months to come up with a way to bring in significant revenue to replace what Google is currently giving them, so that they're ready when that money goes away, because that's going away. That's happening. That's like a 99.99% certainty. The same thing will happen with Apple and Safari, because currently Apple gets billions of dollars from Google for default search engine placement in Safari. Do you know that? It's huge, crazy amounts of money. That's going away. Now, Apple is not in the same boat as Mozilla. Apple makes a fortune off of a lot of things. This will impact Apple's continued revenue through 2025. However, they're not going to go out of business, right? It's going to impact their revenue. When they do one of their quarterly earnings, they'll have to note that, yes, we no longer have this source of revenue that we once had. We'll try to make it up in other ways, blah, 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 blah. But they're going to stay in business. I doubt they will even have to do layoffs because of it. But the big news beyond Mozilla and Apple, which is already pretty notable, is that Google is probably going to be broken up. And that's going to be a process that takes potentially a few years, but will likely begin in 2025. Android and Chrome and ChromeOS, the odds of those being in the same company as Google Search, Google Marketing, and Google AI are incredibly low. If you look at how the court cases are going, what the plaintiffs are seeking, and the arguments that Google is making, which really just don't hold a whole lot of water legally, I don't see how any other outcome is possible at this point. But we'll be watching it. We'll be watching it incredibly closely because, again, this is going to be one of the biggest news items that hits in 2025, and we're seeing the beginnings of it now. Thank you to all the subscribers for the Lunduke Journal. You help make it possible to do this sort of reporting and to keep the lights on here at the Lunduke Journal. I really couldn't do it without you. You make it so that I don't have to take any money from Google. I don't do any default nothing placement for Google. I don't use Google AdSense or AdWords or none of it because I'm the Lunduke Journal. I don't have to because subscribers like you make it so that I can stay in business with no big tech influence, and I get to do this sort of reporting. It's fantastic. So with that, Lunduke.com, Lunduke.locals.com. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across these beautiful inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.